Greetings, Don Webb. It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. Welcome to Conversations with Father Sebastiaan.
Thank you so much for having me. I
So,
really enjoyed the material I've seen of yours out and on the web. So I was glad you asked.
well, I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time. I'm kind of a little bit of a historian of the Left Hand Path organizations that are out there. I'm very familiar with the Temple of Set. I'm very familiar with the Church of Satan. I have a lot of friends in both organizations, and I'm a passionate historian of those things. And it's really great to talk to people who have been there.
Okay.
And I used to live in the IOT, Elementus Athenateros chapter, which happened to be also the Kerk von Satan, the Church of Satan in Amsterdam for 3 years.
Cool.
So I got to become familiar with Martin Lamas. I don't know if you're familiar with that name.
I am. I have friends, or I had a friend who has since passed, who was a friend of his.
What's that?
I had a friend who knew him quite well some years ago.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm going to do an interview with the last surviving member of that grotto.
Wow.
And he was my roommate for 3 years. And I call him the happy Satanist or a yuppie Satanist, because you wouldn't tell. Like, you couldn't tell he was left-hand path and priest in the Church of Satan and stuff like that. But what I want to talk to you about today is, what is the left-hand path? Okay, because there seems to be a whole variety of different definitions, and I seem to be more in line with yours. Okay, and also get to know you a little bit, because this is our first time talking, and I know that our conversations will be very inspiring for other people.
All right, I'll respond to that in two separate ways.
Okay.
Firstly, let's look at this phrase in English, the left-hand path. That's very traceable. It goes back to a British novelist named Bulwer Lytton. And Bulwer Lytton wrote a novel called Xanoi, which was incredibly popular among Golden Dawn types and other sort of Victorian occultists. And he plucked this term from Sanskrit, Vamamar, and made up a definition. And the definition he made up is that it was a path that gave you personal immortality at the expense of being human. If I remember the novel, the guy could stay on the left-hand path until he cried. Basically the same plot as Bell Book and Candle. And then for a long time in the English-speaking world, left-hand path was a word that you used to describe the people you hated.
Oh.
We're the right-hand path, and that group, that's the left-hand path.
The adversary.
The adversary, and whatever they're doing is what we're on the side of God. Whatever we're doing, weird sect mention. God loves this, but those guys. One of my favorite examples would be when Aleister Crowley made a pass at Austin Spare, and Spare said, "No, I don't. You're not my type." Crowley immediately, you are a brother of the left-hand path. So there we have like Crowley's working definition, which is you won't put out. Anton LaVey did this amazing thing in 1966 with the help of some of his kind of publicity advisors at the time, and said, "All right, I'm going to take that term. That is us. Don't know what it means, but we're it.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go Satan. We're going to glorify the body. We'll do everything that we're condemned for doing." Sold really well, but not theologically a deeply well thought out position. When Michael Aquino left the Church of Satan,
was that January 1975?
1975. He tried to decide what the path meant, and his initial idea is the left-hand path is the path of non-union. That the follower of the left-hand path does not seek to become one with the cosmos.
That makes
Not
sense.
a bad idea. His student and my initiator, Dr. Stephen Flowers, gave a wonderful historical piece called Lords of the Left-Hand Path.
I've read that book.
And Flowers came to the conclusion, and I think quite correctly, that this original term in Sanskrit, Balamard, although it does have the meaning of way of the woman, or literally way of kind of dirtiness, is the path of non-union. That basically you do these things, these activities that separate you, first off, from your societal programming as the first step to developing an independent will. And I think that's a much more sophisticated approach, that the left-hand path is basically the path of spiritual descent. That doesn't mean that one simply does the opposite of the mainstream, because the mainstream hasn't been a focus group for some decades. And there's a huge amount of just acceptance of pretty much anything in our society. So you don't become left-hand path now through sex or drugs or appearance. You know, I used to say that Satan lost his power as soon as he sold an album.
So Satan sold out.
Yeah, well, you know, it's an easy image to use, and it's amazing how quickly that image is gobbled up. Okay. Here's two examples I think are really funny. When Anton LaVey made the sigil for the Church of Satan, and we've all seen it, you know, with the go-to-Mendes and the letters Leviathan written around it.
I have a question.
Okay.
That book, he stole that from a book.
He did. Maurice Bessie's 1001 Pictures of Magic.
Yes.
Which I don't have easily available. He literally traced it. And once he put that out there, that became the image of the devil. You'll see that in any number of movies, just like, this is it. Knowing, not particularly knowing where it came from or what its significance was. Originally it was part of a seal in a French book that...
The Secrets of French Freemasonry by Leo Taxil.
Well, yeah, see, there you have that perfect example. Like, guy makes up this whole story and it never dies. It will not end. Even when Taxil says, look, I made that up to show you how gullible people are. The Satanist got to him. You know, there are things still reported from Leo Taxil. I was in a cult crime seminar once when I bothered to try to educate the public that way. And I had policemen quoting that book to me, you know, about the nature of Lucifer. And I'm like, you can arrest people and you're carrying guns. And that's like a really well-known hoax. That's been a well-known hoax for over 100 years at this point. And I'm like, okay. Bad, you know, bullshit never dies.
Was it like the Dan Brown of the time?
What?
Was it like the Da Vinci Code of the time?
It in a lot of ways it was, because it was wonderfully popular, and it had these great moments, because the Satanists, the Palladists, were they were all Freemasons, I believe, in North Carolina. And one of the nicer features is, in order to get their instructions from Satan, they had a new device, the telephone. And they would literally ring up Satan once a week at a some kind of ritual, and then, you know, I guess I don't know, dial 666 probably, and then they would talk with him, because Taxil thought that was such a stupid detail that no one would believe it. Completely acceptable to the gullible mind. Victorians kind of liked techno-occultism anyway, so he really hit something that worked out pretty well that way.
Madame Blavatsky?
Blavatsky, you know, she had her own, you know, I mean, she did really cheap parlor tricks. And as a consequence, right, was seen as a really deep thinker. Now, Blavatsky had an amazing mind. she read literally hundreds of books and plagiarized from several. And there's a lot of indication she would do this without going and looking up the book. It'd be like, oh yeah, I had that when I lived in America 20 years ago, and I'm sitting in India right now, but I remember what it said. Her mind was extraordinary that way.
Mhm.
But the way she fooled her devotees was really simple mentalism.
Okay. So where does apotheosis come into left-hand path?
Well, that idea that one can become a god is an old, it's a classical idea. I mean, that's why we have a Greek word for it. The notion used to be in classical times, if I can deal with the shaping of reality on the same level as Zeus, I am equal to Zeus. Now then that gets down to, what do we think of as reality? If I assume reality is just the physical, just what I can see here, obviously I don't have that power. I cannot make the pencil float by force of mind. But by force of mind, we actually create everything anyway. Our emotions, our feelings, our ties, our memory. If I am in control of that, then on some level, I am a god.
Mhm.
And that's all there without, bad special effects.
So where is so what years did the left-hand path really take shape as we know it today? Like, run down in history.
Well, I think some of the things that were very important. One, there was a major break. Let me think. All right, I would start it with Randall Beverly Pascal, who 19th century mulatto thinker who developed a lot of what, if you read it today, reads just like chaos magic. He literally began to think his way through how to do magic, and he came up with brilliant stuff. He also produced a tremendous amount of sexual magic materials. But the first thing he realized is, hey, I can't just say, I'm a black guy living in America and came up with this. So he developed a huge backstory, none of which is true. But his books caught on. His books were very popular reading for the Golden Dawn, but forbidden because of the sexual and drug content.
Was he American or English?
He was American.
Okay.
Of course, one of the persons that began to sort of popularize the idea of the occult, because he was such a media whore, would be Aleister Crowley.
Mhm.
And Crowley had this tremendous revelation, which is, if you reach a certain point of development, you can trust your own instincts. All right, basically that in itself can be said to be the left-hand path.
Okay.
Now, his law, do what thou wilt, should be the whole of the law, which he says very clearly does not apply to every human. It applies to people who have achieved, using his nomenclature, the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. What that really means is, through mental and magical discipline, you can access some of the hidden parts of yourself in a reliable way. And when you reach that point, a guru is not going to help you. A book is not going to help you. You are ultimately your own guide. It's a tremendous breakthrough. It's a dangerous breakthrough because humans give themselves a lot of credit. And they'll say, yep, nope, I'm there. I got that going on. However, his system, he chose to do certain things, one of which was publicize widely, and get this idea out in the world. Several other systems grew up in its wake. Modern Wicca grew up in the wake of Crowley.
Mhm.
And to a big extent, when Anton was putting his ideas together in between 64 and 66, He's very influenced by Crowley, although he doesn't give Crowley much credit. You can read, however, in the Satanic Bible, his statement on how to do a ritual is really clearly taken from Crowley's magic. I mean, you know, it's step by step the same.
The Black Mass?
And well, the Black Mass is, first off, it's a lot of fun, and it can bring people into wherever you were. I mean, you know, Anton was a small-time performer. He's a guy, you know, here's a guy who never had, as best I can find out, much of a steady job. He lived in his parents' place, but he discovered, right, I forget the naked woman up on the mantle, I can fill a house every Friday night. And what better way to do this than to sell it as religion? Because that guarantees newspapers will come around. You know, for years before the Satanic Panic, every year at Halloween, every newspaper looked around for the local Satanist. And the local Satanist was glad to show up and get his article. I mean, think of this. Anton LaVey was asked by Johnny Carson to bless the Tonight Show. Now, you wouldn't see that today. You know, when I was high priest of the Temple of Set, not many calls from the Tonight Show. I'm pretty sure that our current high priest, you know, is not being asked on SNL. But it was a great gig until people became, during the Satanic Panic, momentarily stupid enough to not understand the difference between a horror movie and reality. And that changed everything. Suddenly, you didn't walk around in public with your big Baphomet on.
But now you can.
Be people that would meet you that literally thought, hey, you're in the back eating a baby, aren't you?
The you know, I look at mainstream media, and one of the things that I want to find out from you is why the Church of Satan got all the rock and roll, and the Temple of Set got the more intellectual university stuff.
And first off, you know, apologizing for our Temple of Set members that are musicians, but then don't market themselves that way.
Okay.
You guys don't. You know, I'm not the one that said it. Okay. Now, Anton discovered that. Well, Anton was always good for a photo op.
Yeah.
You know, somebody call him up, and Marilyn Manson, hey, you know, I want to go be a photo op. He comes, he shows up. Anton, you know, looks, well, son, I can tell that you have always been a priest of Mendes. And hold on, let me see. Let me see. I got a medallion right here. We'll give that to you. Go for it. It's a great publicity gig. And in some sense, it's a very legitimate philosophical statement, because you're saying, hey, my standards are not being derived from, you know, Judeo-Christian standards, and I represent pleasure above anything else. That works pretty well with the rock and roll aesthetic.
Okay.
You know, that fits in, right? You got sex, you got drugs, you got rock and roll. That easily works together. Now, of course, the funny part of that was Anton hated that musically.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he really was kind of, and he writes about this in some of his places. He really sort of went for sort of jazz numbers of the 30s. Again, stuff that, you know, he would hear growing up in kind of seedy clubs. Because Anton discovered one of his most profound magical ideas, erotic crystallization inertia, ECI. He discovered that if you could listen to the music or take in other stimulus during that time of your life you were the most sexually active, it was very strengthening to the psyche. So he had this entire theory of magical nostalgia. Nobody else came up with that. That entirely was his own idea. Um, and that's why he also came up with the idea of the ritual chamber as expression of will. And that's why he could say with a lot of theological correctness that Walt Disney was a great Satanist.
Yeah.
Because Disney created environments that completely condition the will. Earlier, you and I had talked a little bit about Vegas. Vegas is a very perfect example of satanic thought in that it creates these environments that completely condition the will of the people there. And there's tremendous amount of psychological conditioning in a casino floor, from the fact that you can't see a clock or a window or walk straight for more than 80 feet, and you got flashing lights, all about between 6 and 10 hertz, which is a good trance-inducing state. And then you have scantily clad women handing you, weak alcohol all day. That is a tremendous piece of psychological manipulation. It makes like a European cathedral look like an Amateurville act.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been dealing with is different cities call me, and I feel an urge to, I felt an urge to go to New York. Okay, I felt an urge to go to Dubai. I felt an urge to go to Paris. I lived in Paris for 8 years studying. I was doing a mystery tour. Cool. So I was studying I was walking through the alchemical map of Paris every week, doing this tour, exploring the catacombs, doing rituals in the catacombs. And I lived in the Church of Satan in Amsterdam, the Kerk van Satan. And the history of that church is that grotto is pretty interesting. And what was interesting was also my interactions with the Scientologists. I'm not going to say where or when, because to protect the innocent. But I actually talked to a chaplain in the Church of Scientology who admitted to the Babylon working with with Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard. That's actually a discussion that exists within the Church of Scientology. So I still maintain a very friendly relationship with them, even though I'm not a member. But I do ghost hunts in the Celebrity Center in LA, and just talking to them, I see a lot of Crowley's influence in their theology. And
in fact, in some of Hubbard's earlier writings, he mentions Crowley, a few times very positively, and then later that's kind of scrubbed out of church history.
Yeah.
But one of the things that Hubbard was really impressed with was the idea that Crowley said that to make something work, you assume it already has worked. Just like the basic magical principle in a ritual. If I'm going to do an operant ritual, if I'm going to change something in the outside world, ritually, I already state this has happened. Mm-hmm. It is here. Or
so it's like fake it until you make it?
Yeah. Just start out with the idea on a deep inner level. I have done this. I have achieved. And that doesn't require any sort of magical technology other than whatever it takes to get that into your head. Most of chaos magic also, right? This very basic idea of I'm going to change my belief structure, the world changes. You make a change in the subjective universe, change will happen in the objective universe.
Have you met Peter J. Carroll?
I have not met him. I have mutual people that know him. I'm going to say mutual friends, but they're not friends with him anymore.
Just for the audience to know, Peter J. Carroll is one of the founding fathers of chaos magic. Of the IoT, the main chaos magic order, the Illuminates of Thanateros in 1978, I believe, 76, somewhere around there, late 70s. And I think he's British.
He is British. Of course, I know Phil Farber and Phil Hine, who are both pretty good chaos magicians. And then probably my closest connection is the gentleman that writes as Frater UD.
Thornton?
Ralph Tegmeyer is his actual name.
Oh, okay. I thought it was someone else. Sorry. This is a really fascinating discussion because one of the things that I always like to do is find out from people who know more than me. And it's like playing a game of pool, always play with someone that can kick your ass.
Right, raise the next level, sure.
Yeah, and I never thought I'd be talking to you, and here we are, and you look like definitely a wizard now. No, but the beard is very. I love the beard. Keep the beard. Don't lose the beard. Okay. I'm working on my beard, but I got my Amish gangster look, so doing that. But so let's go back and let's talk a little bit about yourself. How did you find the left-hand path in the Temple of Set?
Well, the Set knocked on my door a few times. The first time, oddly enough, I would be about the age of 11, watching a soap opera called Dark Shadows. It's a Gothic soap opera of the time. And there was a moment where the witch Angelique was fighting a rival, and she needed to get the most powerful source of power in the universe. And so she invoked Set, and that immediately was like, wow, what the hell is this? I mean, this woman literally chats with Satan. That was like an episode, and who is this? So it had a huge effect on my young psyche. That oddly enough was sublimated into Egyptology for years. But then the way that the Temple of Set and I existed as an adult, one time in my life was in such bad shape. I was literally living in Lubbock, Texas, and that's if you're living in Lubbock, Texas, you're at a low orbit.
Okay.
And I had been a practitioner of a sort of eclectic neo-shamanism influenced by the novels of Carlos Castaneda.
Okay.
And I'd played with this for some years and had discovered two things. One, I could create magical effects. I could actually do things and it seemed to affect probability. But two, I wasn't getting anywhere. And I looked around at all the occultists and practitioners and, apartment house shamans and people that I could meet. And they all kind of had a screw loose. And I thought, my God, I'm hanging around with people who are losers in various fashions. So I came to a decision, and my decision was that I was going to ask the universe for a teacher. And if I didn't get one, I would keep this a low-level hobby and not really devote my life to it. So I went and performed a very corny and gladly that I did not write it down, shamanic ritual. And there were omens that occurred, winds swept around, and then nothing. And I'm like, okay, well, that's it. I can say words and get a little windstorm. Yay. And I'm not going to tell that to people because that's a sign I'm not well grounded in reality. So from Lubbock, a change in employment brought me to Austin, Texas. And when I got to Austin, I decided, you know what? I'm not going to pursue the occult anymore. I'm done. And then to deal with just my desire to play with these ideas, I thought, I'm going to go back to playing D&D. I really enjoyed that. So I write a card, wanting to run a D&D game. I stick it up at a local game shop, get a phone call, meet some people, join a D&D group. Okay. Going along in the D&D group, having a great time. Started writing for FASA and TSR and Flying Buffalo and some of the other little people that still did.
Real quick, a note to our audience who includes a lot of Gen Z and Gen
Sure.
X. Gen Z and Gen Y and just things. FASA is a Chicago-based company that I don't know if exists anymore. I think they published BattleTech and Shadowrun.
Shadowrun.
Okay, and TSR was the company that owned D&D before Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah. Those days we used dice made out of mammoth bones. Very, very old. Now, I had joined this group and would go and play every week. And I would see, by the way, I'm somewhat of a science fiction writer. I have written in several dozen science fiction magazines. You can find stories by me. I had received a request to write a story about the Salem witch trials. This was 2 years before the 300th anniversary. So it'd be 3 years, 1989. And I said, yeah, sure, of course, I'll write for this. And so I went and was researching the Salem witch trials. And I had made my own schemata of how the witch trials developed, how it begins this level of rumor, and then society becomes crazier, they get worse and worse data, And I was really happy with this little chart I had made for my story, because we're going to set my story in a futuristic time, but I was going to follow these same things. So I set that down, and I turned on the television to take a break, and Geraldo Rivera was having a show called Satanism in America. And it had a big swirling Leviathan Baphomet would shoot out at you, and big noises. And there were these experts on occult crime. And I was sitting there listening to this crap. And everything on my list about how the hysteria had started, these people were saying. So I mean, literally,
so it was a repeat.
They were talking about spectral evidence, like people have dreams, or allegations of meetings in the woods. They're out there. I mean, it's just, it's everything from Salem, step by step by step. And then what was worse, they had two Satanists there. One was Zena LaVey, who nowadays is just Zena, and the other was Dr. Aquino, a really weird-looking guy and the pointed, eyebrows.
The famous eyebrows.
But man, these are creepy people. At one point, this huge investigator, but this guy weighed 400 pounds, said, "Geraldo, there are thousands of Satanists in America, and I know them all. I know the terrible crimes they have committed." And the Aquino guy looked at him very calm and said, "Well, if that's the case, officer, why don't you arrest them?" And this guy just kind of sputtered, right? I mean, it logically deflated the whole thing. Geraldo called for a commercial. And I thought, wow, that was amazing. Here's this guy that's like, well, I don't know who he is, but I wish I could send him a note. All right, turn off the show, go to my D&D game. Remember the D&D game I joined, so I wouldn't be in the occult anymore. And I start saying in the D&D game, I said, I don't know who this Aquino guy is, but I would love to send him a letter because I love the look on Geraldo's face when he said that. I said, I would send that guy a letter like that. I don't write letters to people on TV.
I have a question. This was 1983?
1989. Very late.
1989.
Yeah,
was Zena already disenfranchised from LaVey at the time?
No, that was when she was the acting high priestess. When she
of COS?
were trying to get the Church of Satan started again.
Okay.
And that later, as kind of went south. So I'm saying that one person keeps giving me this like death stare, like shut up. And I'm like, hey, what is wrong with you? And then she said to me, "I need you to drive me home." Okay, I'm with her, and I'm thinking I'm fixing to get a lecture about how dangerous, right, Satanism is. And this woman looked at me and said, "So you want to send a letter to Dr. Aquino?" I was like, wow, on the show, he was Colonel Aquino. Why is he Dr. Aquino? I said, yeah. He said, "I'm seeing him next week at the International Templistic Conclave in Toronto. I can take the letter for you."
So your D&D buddies were Setians?
My D&D buddy was a member of the Council of Nine. And I said, okay. And so I wrote a letter to Michael Aquino saying how impressed I was. And I also wrote to him saying, I don't understand what a group is for if you all do individual. It's all about the individual. I don't understand the value of a group. But I was really impressed with the way you stood up to Avaldo. Handed this letter to her. She takes it off to me. A couple of months later, he writes back to me. Dear Mr. Webb, thank you for your kind letter. As far as your point of you don't understand how a group can help individualism, frankly, we haven't figured it out either. Maybe you should join and tell us. Sincerely, Michael Aquino. I was so intrigued by that remark that I joined. I joined the local pylon here in Austin, the Bombos pylon. And of course, the founder of that pylon, who is now one of my closest friends, Dr. Stephen F. Flowers.
Lords of the Left-Hand Path.
Lords of the Left-Hand Path and 39 other books.
Yeah, I know.
Was my initiator. And I went through the temple. The temple was a very well thought out logical system. I liked what it said to say with magic. I was actually the high priest 7 years later.
So you were from 98 to 2001?
I was from 96 to 2001. Would be my year.
What? Everybody's going to ask this, and I'd like to know about from the guy himself. What are the differences between the Church of Satan and the Temple of Set?
All right.
What is the relationship?
I don't know if it is a relationship anymore. I would say the differences, and I think you could probably ask any Satanist or Satan and get a different answer than what I'm about to give you. The Church of Satan has this approach, the psychological, all magic is all psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is inherently powerful because of its traditional meaning or because of its mythological place. It's entirely a way to deal with a process within inside ourselves for altering reality. Satan is a symbol of modernity, of being rational, of enjoying the senses. Church of Satan officially, for example, believes in this life only, does not believe in immortality. Okay. Although some of Anton's writings, he went back and forth on that idea. The Temple of Set is a Neoplatonic organization. We actually view reality as being grounded on something deeper. Plato would say on the forms. We would say that the form of isolate intelligence, the blueprint for every sentient being, is the entity we call Set. We do not owe this entity worship, but we see this entity as paradigmatic of the struggle we all have to achieve consciousness separate from the universe. The setting would say the ultimate goal of the left-hand path would be personal immortality. The Satanists would say the ultimate goal of the left-hand path would be having a really, really good life here and now. Mm-hmm. Other than the obvious strong feelings in the founders of the two organizations, I don't think today there is the antagonism you might have found 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. With the exception, I do tend to see just online every now and then the sort of young new Church of Satan person who feels the need to sort of preach against the evils of Satanism. And I don't see that as much on the TOS side. We would represent a continuum in belief on the left-hand path system, from the Church of Satan being this life now, evidence of the senses. There's nothing more than this. but for some reason magic works. To the Setian, this life is a key to a greater way of participating in reality. And then, of course, between these two, there's a lot of different approaches. I think that we are probably closer to some of the historical approaches to the left-hand path, which is largely the same conclusion that Flowers came to in Lords of the Left-Hand Path. Interestingly, because first off, because the founder had a PhD, and then some of our members like Stephen Flowers had PhDs, there tends to be a movement to this being more connected with an academic and scholarly approach. Oh, that's not in any way needed. I mean, there are Setians that own pizza restaurants and didn't get through high school. But there is a tremendous respect of learning that exists in the Temple of Set as a whole, not to say there aren't extremely learned people in the Church of Satan. Dr. Michael Moynihan is one of the smartest people I know, and still, I believe, maintains his connections with the Church of Satan. It's more of a, perhaps a philosophical difference. Now, what's oddest right now is that after several years of psychological fear of the left-hand path, the time we talk about is the Satanic Panic, now suddenly there's a large number of groups and philosophies that have come into being. And currently, left-hand path is almost a marketing phrase in the same way that chaos magic became after its founding. Then it went to that period that there were tons of books on it, or NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which became very popular. Right now, the left-hand path is extremely popular. 10 years from now, there'll be some other fad that will absorb the wannabe occultist.
What was it like being high priest? What were your duties and responsibilities?
Dealing with legitimate scholars and media inquiries about the temple, writing articles where I dealt with philosophy. I wrote most of probably all the large group workings we have at Conclave. We have one international gathering a year.
Mm-hmm. Did you do it virtually this year?
This year we did some workings, not virtually, although some people have used that format. We did some simultaneous workings, and then we're going to have a very large conclave next year.
Oh, cool. And does the conclave move around?
Yes, we as an act of will, when the Temple of Set was founded, our first conclave we wanted to not even have in America. So as best we could do in those days, we just went over the border into Canada. Generally, we have one non-US site and then 2 US sites in a row. So
okay.
It would have been any number of places: San Francisco, New Orleans, Las Vegas, and then versus like Munich, London, Porto, various European sites. We have not had an Asian one yet.
When the orders were founded, that was the conclave of 1984?
I would before my time, but yeah, I think that would be about Set 4, yeah.
Now, how many orders are they, and what is an order within the Temple of Set?
I believe there are 6 active orders. That may not be correct. When an initiate reaches the level of initiation we refer to as Master of the Temple, we have a 6-degree system. When you reach the 4th degree, one of the signs of the 4th degree is you have a coherent teaching. In other words, you have an aesthetic, you have a philosophy, you have something you're interested in, and you create a group to study and practice these things. Generally, for most people, they may make one order at all in their whole of their career. I've made two. But the most famous orders I'll deal with first. Firstly is the Order of the Trapezoid. The Order of the Trapezoid is a knightly order that was founded by Michael Aquino. It's an order that uses as its central myth the Grail quest.
What is it, the relationship between that and the Church of Satan's Order of the Trapezoid?
There is in fact that, because when Dr. Aquino decided to create orders, there had always been, at least in theory, although not as much in practice, an Order of the Trapezoid within the Church of Satan. Mainly it dealt in the Church of Satan with angular magic. One of the unique things in the American left-hand path that you will not find anywhere else is angular magic. There's a really, really good book, finally, that's publicly accessible, called Infernal Geometry,
okay,
by Toby Chappell.
That's a cool name.
And in fact, if you like, I'll tell you how you can contact him if you ever want to interview him. Angular magic deals with the effect of both angular space, like the shape of a ritual chamber, and it deals with angular time. Now, that's a kind of a bizarre phrase.
Is it similar to sacred geometry?
It is similar to sacred geometry, although perhaps it's the actually opposite number. Hold on a sec. Yeah.
Who published it?
This is by Inner Traditions.
Okay.
And Toby Chappell is actually an really gifted magician. Angular time came largely out of a fantasy story by Frank Belknap Long called The Hounds of Tyndalus. And in that fantasy story, Long said there's two types of time. There's circular time, which is what most humans move in. Everything repeats. The seasons go in a certain order. We have elections every 4 years. We do all these things about an eternal return, all fixed. Angular time, things move in radical shifts. The Temple of Set sees angular time as a perfect exemplar of your thought. For example, in circular time, you will always get the same thing. If I take an object and I let it go, it falls. In angular time, the time of the mind, completely different things may happen. Today, I might look around and see this little figure of Horus that's on my desk, and I'll think about Egypt. Tomorrow, I could see that same figure of Horus and think about the guy that gave it to me. Or I could think about, why do I have so much art cluttered on my desk? The mind goes through strange and apparently random changes. Angular time deals with how to manipulate these things both inside your own mind and in the minds of others. You may have, if you at some point in time read the Satanic Rituals, there's an angular time ritual that was written by Michael Aquino when he was a member of the Church of Satan, called The Rite of the Nine Angles. That in some ways,
I remember the ritual. That was the only other book published by Avon Books in the
yeah, Avon popped out there too. They had Satanic Bible and the Satanic Rituals. LaVey was not someone that enjoyed writing, so he got as much of his material as he could written by other people. Aquino wrote two of the rituals.
The Cthulhu ritual.
Various other authors of the rituals.
I remember something about a Cthulhu ritual.
Also written by Michael Aquino, The Call to Cthulhu.
Yes.
Originally performed in San Francisco near the Cliff House in the beach underneath there, which is a wonderful place to do magic at night because you have this dark, chilling fog rising up.
Oh, wow.
Big black rocks and crashing waves. So that in itself, the call to Cthulhu had a really strange effect on world occult phenomena, and I'll let you in on this. One of the members of the Church of Satan that performed that, she has since passed. I'll not mention her name for the sake of her relatives. Wrote a letter about this to Michael Bertois in Chicago. Chicago says, Lovecraftian magic. This will be cool. We'll start doing that. Michael Bertois wrote to Kenneth Grant. Kenneth Grant said, I've been looking at Lovecraft. Wow, this would be completely perfect. So from this one moment in the Church of Satan, suddenly you had this very bizarre thing happen in 1972, where on one hand, we see Avon Brooks producing the Satanic Rituals that has a Cthulhu ritual. And then in Britain, Kenneth Grant suddenly writes about Lovecraft as an occultist. It looks as though, out of nowhere, 1972 is the year it appeared.
The year of Cthulhu.
It all began on a single ritual in San Francisco, and right people knowing the other right people.
1972 was also the founding of Grado Magistratus of Amsterdam.
Right.
With Martin Lamas.
It was a great, wonderful year. And
it was better than 2020.
2020 was kind of beyond anyone's expectations. There's only one occult book written that even mentioned that 2020 would be a terrible and fateful year.
Zozo?
The only book that mentions it is Uncle Setnock's Essential Guide to the Left-Hand Path, written in 1996. Did I call it?
You called it.
But I wasn't expecting this. I was like, there were certain stresses that we could predict would be big in the year, but it was a lot bigger than I thought. It's like saying, I think there'll be a small avalanche. Holy fuck, the mountain fell. Okay.
Well, it was better than the pandemic in 1919.
It's certainly shows some of the same process, right? You have an outbreak, people get tired of quarantining, then you have the big outbreak. Humans aren't good at learning things. The bigger the human group, the stupider it is.
Thank God America is not the biggest country in the world.
You know, although we oftentimes confuse our interests in a lot of places in ways that maybe we shouldn't. I'm not an isolationist. I'm just like, I think a lot of times America does not think about that maybe it isn't the policeman or businessman or whatever of the world it thinks it is. So that's all I'm gonna get. That's about the limit of my political thought. Now,
our second to last question, because we have an hour for this, because Instagram only let an hour. There's some things I'd like to ask you off camera.
Okay.
And I would like to ask them, so because I don't want to put anybody on the spot or reveal any private information or anything like that. But what would be a final thing you would like to say to seekers of the left-hand path that, like you said, did you find out that it was for individuals or groups worked with it?
I did. I actually found out that it had a very useful model where individuals could prove themselves by doing further and further and stronger acts of individuality. And creativity became highly praised. That's one reason why the Temple Set produces such a staggering number of authors. I realized the other day there's about 40 books by us, which is a lot. And I'm not counting the 40 by Flowers, so I guess 80 books by us. The one thing I would say to anyone who's interested in the left-hand path, you're at the first time ever, there's a lot of good material in English. I will say my own book, Uncle Setnock's Essential Guide to the Left-Hand Path, is a good start. There are others, for sure. But start, do it, practice, do things. Don't just read. Don't put it off. Don't wait for the perfect time or the perfect day or the perfect astrological whatever. Start tomorrow, because we only have a limited amount of time we live on this earth, and every moment can be much more magical and interesting once you put it in motion.
Great. Thank you, Don. It was a pleasure. And where can we find you? Like, do you have a website, Instagram, Twitter?
I don't have a website. Publicly, I hang out a lot on a Facebook group called The Source, Left Hand Path Resources, which is a private group, but if you show that you have a legitimate interest, you can join. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I publish a lot of things. I have
Amazon?
Yeah, you can find a lot of my stuff on Amazon.
Great.
And in fact, I'll have other books even out this year that you and I might get together later and talk about.
Oh, absolutely. I'm looking forward to that.
Okay.
So thank you, Don, very much. I'm going to end the recording now. And if you want to look up Don Webb, you can find him as Uncle Setnock,
yeah.
Setnock on Amazon, and his great books. Also, his mentor, Stephen Flowers, Lords of the Left Hand Path, who is what introduced me to the Left Hand Path. Thank you, Don.